Um, a longtime friend of both Matt and I's from the Detroit Bureau, Paul Eisenstein. He's kind of like the auto writer's auto writer, you know. So
I really like your background there too. It looks like you should be playing chess with death or something in the background there. It looks like a Bergman movie.
Yeah.
It does indeed.
So I wanted to get Paul on because we want to do more of what's going on in auto tech. I mean, the heck, we're the Metro Detroit area, even though I'm in Ann Arbor. And Matt's in Dearborn. Paul, I think live in Detroit, don't you?
I live just north of it in Pleasant Ridge.
Okay, yeah. So I mean, and I'm a former auto writer at the Free Press many moons ago. That's where I first met Paul. But let's talk about, gosh, there's so many things going on right now. And it seems like a lot of it evolves around electric vehicles, right?
It's amazing. I've been publishing online for 26 years now. Started with Car Connection, sold that, launched the DetroitBureau.com. And as I go back, the beginning, every so often there would be a mention of something electric. 5 years ago, maybe out of typical week where I would do 30 different stories, 2, 3 would have an electrification angle. Today, I have to make sure that I find a way to occasionally have a non-electric story to put on the site. It just increases constantly. And what's really interesting to me is, it used to be electric was all about stuff that a lot of gearheads, a lot of traditional car folks went, what the heck? And now with some of the product coming, muscle cars, the new Ford F-150 Lightning and so on, what I'm finding is the degree of interest from whether you're industry enthusiast or just plain average citizen has accelerated to boot. There's just a lot more interest, and people are getting to know a lot more about what electric means.
Yeah, I spent 11 years at Crane's Detroit Business, and the publisher there, Keith Crane, also published Automotive News and Auto Week. And
right, yeah,
his standard joke that he'd opened a speech with was that the electric car has been 5 years away my entire life, but it's finally happening. And there's, I don't know how many dozen new models we're going to see in the next couple of years. What's the impact on the industry going to be? I keep hearing about, the death of suppliers because there's fewer parts, and, is the grid ready for this? I mean, what are you seeing out there in the landscape?
Well, let's talk about the first thing you mentioned, Matt, which is the number of vehicles out there. When I did a roundup at the end of the 2021 model year, so September or so, there were about 15 what you might call long-range battery electric vehicles available in the US. By that, I mean typically over 200 miles of range per charge, 15, 16. By the end of this calendar year, so that's a 15-month gap, by the end of the 2022 calendar year, I expect there will be about 60. And what's very important about this is that they are covering a much broader spectrum than we had before. It wasn't that long ago that about the only thing that got more than 150 miles was the Tesla Model S, the Tesla Model X, and then you had the smaller ones, the 3 and the Y. Then you started seeing a couple others coming in, and they tended to be quirky sedans, really odd sort of crossovers. You couldn't quite figure out what they are. Well, today we have 3. We now have, with the launch of production of the F-150 Lightning, we now have 3 full pickups, all electric pickups, okay? And by the way, by 2024-25, there may be as many as a dozen all electric pickups on the US market from virtually everybody, even companies that aren't in the segment now, like Kia, Hyundai, and Volkswagen. All right, so what you're seeing is a broad fleshing out of the entire market where anything you're looking for, and that will soon include low-cost vehicles, a $30,000 Chevrolet Equinox, these new vehicles that GM and Honda are talking about that'll go in the $20,000 range, all the way up to the Pininfarina Battista at $1.4 million.
That's Matt's retirement car. I think you're going to
Yeah.
get
Oh,
that
yeah,
one,
yeah,
wasn't it?
that's it. Well,
So,
I think that also involves the right six numbers on a Wednesday or a Saturday. So,
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and then last week, Mark Royce, GM president, announced that the Corvette is going to go electric, which I wasn't surprised, but I was kind of surprised,
Not in the least. We were reporting that there would be an electric Corvette. From the weekend, they actually previewed the Corvette out in California, 3 some years ago. I was told by some of the insiders then that they had reserved in the design the ability to electrify that platform. Now, we're still trying to find out more details. We know that there'll be some sort of hybridized version coming next year. And what's unclear is whether they have a totally separate platform or a modified version of the existing C8 platform that will go all electric. We're seeing a lot of changes in the basic concept, the basic design of electric. Most everybody's going to the skateboard design, where you move the batteries down, way down near the ground, and the motors as well. And yes, these vehicles are heavy. Batteries are still heavy. But what you have is this extraordinarily low center of gravity and a very nice 50-50 weight balance, which is, as any gearhead knows, that's really optimal. So you actually have some tremendous performance out of a lot of the new battery electric vehicles. It's really surprising people when they get in. All of a sudden, you get that instant torque, which is what a lot of gearheads like. And then you get the better, like I say, the better center of gravity and everything, which gives you the ability to do some really nice handling, which a lot of your sports car folks like. So what I find is the best way to turn people onto electrification is simply put butts in seats.
Yeah, speaking of which, our mutual friend, Rachel Conrad, that replaced me at the Free Press when I went back on technology again, she has a Tesla, and she's like, she loves that car. She lives in California now. Of course, she has a Tesla, right? But I mean, she says she can't even imagine going back to an internal combustion vehicle again, although you probably couldn't in California anyway, right?
Well, there's still a lot of traditional vehicles available out there, but the state is pushing very rapidly to get the industry to switch over. California basically should be pretty much all electric by early in the next decade, but Washington State is moving that way. New York State's moving that way. A number of countries are. Canada next door is going to be all electric, not very long into the 30s. Britain, Norway, even Germany is thinking about going all electric. And again, what I think you're finding is that people are getting more and more excited about it. Yeah. And California, it's very interesting. You're right. I'm out there almost every week because of test driving vehicles, as you know, with all the previews that are on. I'll be leaving tomorrow morning for San Diego. And you see Teslas everywhere. The question I have is whether we're seeing Tesla fatigue. There are so many out there, it's almost becoming obnoxious. And you're starting to hear people say they want something different. Well, they've got a lot of options right now. And in many cases, they've got options coming in segments of the market that they didn't have before. So I think that Tesla is going to face, there's no question, they will lose market share just because the market will grow bigger. The question is whether there will be some real challenges to them that might start impacting them even as they expand production capacity. One of the real tests will be the launch of the F-150 Lightning, which just went into saleable production. I have one on order. I should be getting mine in about a month. And that is likely to be the first vehicle, if Ford can boost production capacity. The F-150 Lightning is likely to be the first non-Tesla battery electric vehicle to get into 6 figures annual sales.
Now, do you have a 440 volt charger at your house, or having one installed? Or are you going to go with 220, or what's?
No, there's no way you're going to see the average person install a 440 level 3. There's no value to putting level 3, which today would cost you $250,000 to install at home. But to put a higher amperage level 2, 240 volts, 40, 50, even 70 amp circuit into your home. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Depending on your construction, what circuitry you have right now.
Well, and
It
if
can
you
run
have an
anywhere
electric,
from $1,000
if you have an electric stove and an electric dryer, you've kind of already got it anyway. You just have to put a plug in the garage, right? So
Yeah, it's not as cheap as you think. It depends on where you have your wiring and all. Depends on whether your circuit board can handle all that. So, I mean, let's face it. People have to be aware that they can spend $5,000 or $6,000 to wire up a home if it's an older home and it doesn't have the good capacity. One of the good things is in many states, including Michigan, there are tax incentives and other incentives. I believe DTE offers about $500 in rebates for people that buy an electric vehicle and put a charger in.
All right, we're coming down towards the end here. What final points do you want to make? What's talking about EVs? Is that pretty much the whole future here for the auto industry? Is there, they're talking about hydrogen a little bit? Do you think hydrogen is fuel cells are ever going to come around? Or
I think hydrogen will find a niche, but I think it will probably be limited to heavy duty trucks and maybe medium duty on longer range, because getting batteries up to the point where you can really do 1,000, 1,500 miles on a charge and not basically cut hugely into the capacity of the truck, its total load. I just think we're still a little bit away from that. Passenger cars, it's a bit of a question. Costs haven't come down where they're supposed to. I think it'd be difficult to make a case to get real high volumes of fuel cell vehicles for the average citizen.
Matt?
okay. Real quick, what I said before about suppliers with electric vehicles having fewer parts, is there going to be a sort of a shakeout in the supplier segment?
There's no question there's going to be changes in the supplier segment, and the smart suppliers right now are already trying to find ways to move over to electric technology. You're going to see some of the old suppliers either sold or just simply slip out of business. But you're also going to see an impact on employment. A lot of the production, batteries themselves will be largely robotized, battery packs as well. I think you're going to wind up seeing a decline in automotive employment overall over the next 10 years. Oh, by the way, the good part is there's a lot of pressure to bring production back to the US. So I think we actually may see more of tomorrow's battery electric vehicles produced locally, which may offset some of the lower employment levels that will be needed in any individual factory on a per vehicle basis.
And then, of course, there's the chips. When I was out in Silicon Valley in the 80s, there was chip makers everywhere. And now they're overseas. So they're all, not all, but I think you'll see a lot of chip manufacturers coming back too, right?
Agreed. We're already seeing Intel talking about investing tens of billions of dollars down in Ohio. There's a lot of pressure to bring chips back, a lot of pressure to bring batteries back. Some people I speak to believe we will have a terawatt of annual battery production in the United States by the end of the decade. I think you're going to see a big demand. You'll also see a lot more pressure for producing the raw materials locally, and of course, recycling. So yes, you may see job cuts in some areas, but I think we're also going to see new jobs created to supply the technology, and also some of the other technologies you'll see in electric vehicles, like connected car and autonomous car technologies.